Welcome to the bonus show, my friends. Texas has a bill which would ban nearly all gender-affirming care, but not just for children, for trans adults. Adults who you would think, under the sort of right-wing view, should be allowed to basically do whatever they want as long as they want to do it and it's not harming anybody else. But this is a bill that is triggering alarm among LGBT advocates in Texas who say the way that Texas has written this bill would make nearly all gender-affirming care illegal. This includes surgical and non-surgical treatments, even for adults. Equality Texas says, while we've seen several bills that would criminalize life-saving health care for trans people, none go as far as this. The bill bans any public funding for trans health care at any age and puts impossible constraints on medical professionals and insurance providers. In addition to that public funding aspect, which is really important for low-income individuals, because, hey, listen, you're allowed to be trans and low income. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to the appropriate care that you and your medical providers determine is right for you. They also are going, if the bill passes, they would increase legal liability through malpractice suits for the medical professionals that provide gender-affirming care. The bill also lists as gender-affirming procedures any surgeries performed on the genitals, mastectomies, and prescriptions of puberty blockers or hormones, quote, for the purpose of transitioning a patient's biological sex or affirming the patient's perception of the patient's sex, which is extraordinarily broad as well. So this is horrifying. This is only one of more than 70 anti-LGBT bills that Texas has introduced during this year's legislative session. It's not even March yet. So this is chilling. We worried about this. But all you can do is put one foot in front of the other and do what you can to defeat these bills, Pat.
Yeah, in a sense, this is the logical conclusion that they wouldn't just be targeting gender-affirming care as it pertains to children, but they would also do so as it pertains to adults. And, you know, we sort of facetiously say things like, oh, well, I'm surprised Republicans would want to do this because they're all for personal choice, personal liberty. Once you're an adult, you can make your own decisions.
Yeah.
But we've seen on so many other issues, they don't actually act that way. I mean, they're still trying to ban gay marriage, for example, and that is an issue that exclusively has to deal with adults.
Yes.
And, you know, the right to enter contracts and do the types of things that they want with their own bodies and relationships and that sort of thing. And they also moved last year to get rid of Roe versus Wade, to open up states to being able to ban abortion. And so that obviously also has to do with adults largely who are going to be making decisions about their own bodies. And so, you know, maybe to some degree, I'm a little surprised they're doing this so early, because you'd think that they would spend another year or two just trying to focus on gender-affirming care as it pertains to children, because maybe they could see that as more of a winning issue for them.
Yeah.
But no, in Texas, they're already going for the adults. They're already giving away the game, showing what they want to do. And we shouldn't be surprised at all that this is the direction that they're going in. But maybe it's okay to be a little surprised in how early it's happening.
And as usual, you know, by going to the extreme, they actually prevent serious conversations about questions that should be answered. I mean, I get emails. I just got an email, in fact, from a progressive doctor who is a defender of trans rights and of everything, right? But she also said, you know, the early studies on the use of puberty blockers raise some real questions about the long-term health effects. It's often reflexively said the effect is temporary and there's no long-term effect, but there are growing numbers of studies that are that are complete, some that are being done, that raise questions about osteoporosis in biological females who take the block, things that exceed my personal knowledge as someone who's not a doctor. But there's stuff we have to figure out. There's legitimate things that we should figure out, but we can't do it in a reasonable way because every conversation is tainted by anti-trans extremism from people like those in the Texas legislature.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, there's so much hubris on this issue. In the right wing, they act as if they're experts on this. Really, what's going on is they are perturbed by the idea of it, or they have some sort of transphobia, or they feel as though kids aren't actually trans, or, feeling as if they belong to a different body than the one that they have. Really,
Yep.
what's going on is that they're just confused and they need more God in their life, and that's going to solve everything.
Yeah.
These people that are putting forward these bills, these lawmakers and the advocates, like, have they actually looked into these issues? I don't get the sense that they have. And
No.
yeah, like you point out, there can be nuance with this stuff because a lot of it is newer, right? I mean, a lot of evidence points to how, puberty blockers and gender affirming care can be quite beneficial for people. And you can look at the data. It doesn't mean every issue is solved on it, but we can't even really have an honest conversation when the right isn't even willing to explore the topic yet they're willing to come to conclusions that are totally nonsensical and not serious on this.
One important thing I think to mention is this particular bill we're talking about is unlikely to pass based on the legal analyses we've seen, but it's part of these more than 70 bills in total. Many of them may well pass, some have, and the sort of cumulative effect is completely chilling, but let's at least hope this one does not pass. It seems as though the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to paying legal bills. Lawyers for Steve Bannon, the former Trump aide and Breitbart propagandist, are now suing him for unpaid legal bills. The law firm Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron said in a lawsuit they filed that Bannon hasn't paid for the work they did. He owes them $480,000 in legal fees, and other Bannon attorneys are looking to end their work over a communications breakdown where they are unable to meaningfully communicate with their client. Reuters was unable to immediately confirm who is still representing Bannon at this point in time. It's really unclear. So, as usual, the same story that we've seen before. And the level of, I've had to make decisions about legal assistance in the past, and but first of all, usually they're asking for a retainer. And although when it's small jobs, I just say, just bill me and then I'll pay for it. It would never even remotely occur to me not to pay my legal bills. Now, is it possible that I could end up in a situation with millions of dollars in legal fees and I have to accept counsel's help because I just need to, and then I don't have the money, and then so I don't pay? It's conceivable that I could end up in such a situation. But the fact that this is a trend among these folks, Trump doesn't pay his legal bills, and now Bannon doesn't pay his legal bills, there's a sort of audacity to it that is quite stunning.
I kind of get the sense that folks like Trump and Bannon could be doing this because they already have to deal with so many headaches when it comes to litigation, be it civil matters or criminal matters that are just ongoing that never seem to end. And maybe so maybe they figure like, okay, well, if I just don't pay my legal bills, maybe eventually I'll get sued over it, and there'll be like a couple of court appearances I have to make, but ultimately the judge could decide in my favor, or they could say that I'm judgment proof, or I'll have to pay a smaller amount of money. Like if this sort of thing happened to you or me, we'd think, okay, we don't want to even deal with the headache. We're just gonna pay the bills because we did, after all, hire these lawyers, and that's what you have to do at the end of the day. But regardless of if Trump or Bannon pay their legal bills, they're still going to have so many legal proceedings to deal with, stuff to be concerned about. So like maybe they just figure it makes sense to save the money in the short term, and maybe by the time this actually is litigated, they will be out of money, or they'll be like serving a prison sentence in Bannon's case, and ultimately the problem will just go away.
Maybe so. And the total bill for Bannon appears to have been $855,000. He paid $375,000, and that's where we get the $480,000 that's outstanding. Another important lesson from all of this stuff is it can get very expensive when you get involved in this sort of hijinks that these guys got involved in, including being held in contempt, lying to investigate, all these different things, many of which are kind of they're unforced errors to a certain degree. Now, being involved in the highest echelon of politics to begin with does carry some risk, even if your intentions are completely on the up and up. When they aren't, and it includes things like lying and then being held in contempt and all these, you're only creating a worse situation for yourself, which gets very expensive.
I mean, maybe they run the numbers, though. Maybe they predict what it's going to cost them ultimately in legal fees and the rest of it
Yeah.
to run some sort of scam having to do with building the wall and fundraising, or they assess what it's going to cost them to decide to be in contempt of Congress by not participating in the January 6th investigation. And they say, okay, well, I'll be able to raise this much money off of how I'm so aggrieved over the charges that I'm facing. I'll be able to, up my cachet within right-wing circles, get more audience attention on me. They'll buy my products and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I'll be down 2 million from the expenses, but I'll be up 3 million from however much I can raise, and there's a profit there. I mean, it seems like incredibly difficult to run the numbers on that sort of thing because you
Risky.
can't predict everything, right? It's risky, but these people, maybe they just like to live life on the edge and they think that they can do it. And I do think that they're definitely thinking about the money when they make these types of decisions.
These are very risky calculations to make, but that doesn't mean you're wrong about that. A Florida lawyer is arguing that a pregnant inmate's fetus is being illegally detained. I find this extraordinarily interesting because it does follow logically from the idea that a fetus is a person. We're talking about a woman named Natalia Harrell, who has been jailed. She's 24. She's been jailed without bond since July because she was accused of fatally shooting another woman. She's been charged with second-degree murder. At the time of the arrest, she was 6 weeks pregnant. She's now 8 months pregnant. And she says that the staff at the jail have endangered the fetus by refusing her proper prenatal care, putting her in situations involving extremely high heat in inmate transport vans, and all sorts of other things. So her lawyer has now filed a petition where he says the unborn child is innocent and should be discharged from jail so that it can receive proper care. Because the child is as of yet dependent on the mother's body, you've got to release the mother as well. And he writes, the unborn child has rights independent of its mother, even though it is still physically dependent on the mother. The child has been deprived of due process of the law in this incarceration, and it has to be a factor in figuring this entire thing out. Now, the argument assumes the unborn child is a person based on the definition under the Florida Constitution. This gets us to fetal personhood, which is a big issue under abortion debates. I've said before, if indeed the fetus is a person at the moment of conception or whenever, then it would follow that the fetus could get citizenship. And it would follow that you could have child support awarded over a fetus and all of these different things. It would follow that if an undocumented immigrant woman becomes pregnant in the United States, because the fetus is a person, it's like the fetus now has been born and thus has citizenship based on how we award citizenship. And so you can't deport a pregnant woman because there's a U.S. citizen in the womb. And this is sort of another one of the things that indeed would follow from that fetal personhood framework.
Absolutely. I think there are maybe two issues as it pertains to this story, because regardless of if you consider the fetus to be a human being or not, this woman should be able to receive the appropriate parental care. She shouldn't be
Yes.
put in transport vans that are too hot and that sort of thing. So even outside of the abortion and fetal rights sort of argument, you can definitely make the case that she should be more properly treated here. I also wonder if this is going to be the most effective case in trying to push for like a pro-choice argument, given the fact that you're dealing with someone who is on trial for second-degree murder, and it's going to be difficult for people to maybe empathize with someone in that sort of situation. Like, it's like when we talk about the death penalty being barbaric, for example, and someone who is put to death having to suffer a bunch because like the lethal injection isn't working properly or what have you. There are a lot of people who turn around and say, well, that person killed 5 people, including a grandma, and so why should I waste my sympathy on them? So it can sometimes be difficult for us to make that sort of argument. I kind of get the same sense with this one. And so that's why, like, maybe when it pertains to this issue, it's better to focus on stories like that woman who was driving in the HOV lane because she was pregnant. She didn't have any
Right.
other passengers in the car, but
Yes.
she got a ticket over that, and that caused this national story. Like, people can more easily identify with someone like that and feel sympathy. And so when it comes to just like sort of our focus when it pertains to this issue, I think we should maybe choose carefully, but it doesn't mean that this isn't an interesting story.
Without a doubt. And I don't know ultimately what the outcome is going to be. And then, of course, 8 months means we are starting to get close to when you would expect that baby to be born and what is going to happen at that point in time. And it's horrible in a whole bunch of different ways. It raises ethical questions. It raises philosophical questions, legal questions, questions about treatment in prison. And this is going to be a story that doesn't end here. That's for sure.
I also get the sense that as we're approaching this issue, we make it seem as though, oh, well, right-wingers will have to answer to this, right? They'll have to pick whatever principle they're in favor of. They'll have to
they won't have to
remain consistent on all these different things. And then we realize, oh, yeah, they'll just do what they normally do, which is pick and choose, go with whatever benefits them at the time. And there's no consistency. They don't actually care about that sort of thing.
And the voters don't care either, so there's no downside to being inconsistent, as we've talked about before. All right, everybody, we will see you tomorrow. New show and new bonus show.